today's recent gem is 2014's Let Us Pray, with Pollyanna McIntosh and Liam Cunningham. You probably know the latter from Game of Thrones, I'd expect, and the former from, I'd hope, The Woman, because that was pretty good too. But they are just the tip of the iceberg in a good cast. A particular shout out to Brian Vernell as Caesar, making the unlikable likeable. He does a really good job of bringing out his fun side that I think makes us warm to him over the production. You know, he's not a perfect character, but he's fun at least. But I think this has all come from the top. You know, writer-director Brian O'Malley, I think, infuses his own passion for the project into everyone else, and I think that's how you get such good performances across the board, really. I think he loves the genre. There are shout-outs and homages, particularly the scene where we're looking up at the sergeant. If that's not lifted from The Shining, I don't know what is. But, you know, it's these things that really come through. And of course, for me, one of the great things in any film is rewatchability. Do I get something out of it the second time? And yes, I do. With the introduction of Caesar, he says, not another one. Now, first time watching, it just, gone. I don't need to worry about it. I've got no point of reference. But the second time, he's hit the girl. I know this now. Not another one. Although it does give him the alibi. It was Six's blood, or the stranger's blood, whatever you want to call him. You know, it was his blood, obviously. It wasn't someone else that I hit before. You know what I mean? And it just makes that really, really good on a second viewing. But also, of course, the big thing for me, and the reason this video exists, is it does give us a lot of interpretation and analysis potential. And that's what I want to get into. So we get into the location. You know, it's very quiet, there's no one else around, and from a production standpoint, there's probably budgetary reasons for that, but I don't want to look at it that way. I want to look at it in universe, and it drew me to a conclusion of maybe this is Purgatory or something similar to that, a limbo, where, you know, they are judged. Now, okay, it doesn't necessarily work, because saying Caesar still has time to rescue a woman, if she wasn't already kind of in a limbo land, it wouldn't matter. But for the most part, it does kind of work as an explanation for why the town is so quiet, and that's what I sort of came to. But we do get introduced to Rachel, who early on we see has a connection to Six in the feather on her pillow. But of course she goes walking to work for her first night on the job as a police officer, and stops Caesar after he hits Six, and of course takes him in. Now, again, something that I saw the second time, and unfortunately I can't show here, what we know of the sergeant later on, shall we say. There's a particular image on his screen when they come in. I'll let you watch it yourself. Like I say, I can't put it here, it will be automatically flagged, I have little doubt. It's not as bad as Westworld, but it certainly, I think, would be noticeable, and that's why I can't put it here. But like I say, have a look yourself. You'll know what I mean. And then, of course, as the night goes on, you know, we're introduced to Mundy and Warnock, and of course, finally, we locate Six. He's brought in, very silent, possibly a bit fruit and nut, as we're told. And of course, all these people are horrible people. One of my early theories that I did end up throwing out, of course, as it went on, was that maybe there were representations of the 7 deadly sins, particularly Warnock and Mundy being lust, etc. But there's too much crossover, there's too much duplication, because you could argue they have wrath and pride, maybe a bit of envy. Dr. Hume and Beswick, you know, wrath, possibly pride, etc. So I did have to throw that one out, which is a shame, because I thought I'd cracked it, but I think that would have been very derivative. And whilst this isn't an original idea, it's been done in various different ways before, at least Brian O'Malley brings his own ideas to the front, and I think that would have actually worsened it if they were all meant to be a sin each. But like I say, we do meet Six, the stranger. And I think there is a flash of recognition, as we learn later on, obviously with Rachel's history. But he says, the first in many biblical references too. This film is littered with them. Towards the last 20 minutes, they're a bit more random, crazy guy spoutings. But before that, they all seem to have a relevance to the scene or to what's going on. And his first one, of course, is from Revelation 6:8.
It's a pale horse,
whose rider is death, and hell follows with him. Now, the stranger, Six, whatever you call him, he could be a number of things. I have a theory, which I will come to later. because I've not seen it anywhere else. And there's enough evidence that it might work. But he could be death. He could be the devil. He could simply be an angel whose job it is to collect the souls of the dead. But either way, he's more than human, clearly. I mean, the fact that he's followed around by crows, which are often associated with death, does maybe bear out a little on there, but I think crow imagery has been used again in various different forms, in various different ways. So it is very open to interpretation, I think, and, this is only my view that I will come to later. But one of the other interesting characters, if you will, like I've said about him before being a very fun character, is Caesar, because he's the only one who has a chance. He's given a way out, and it's interesting that if you were to assign archetypes, I guess, if you've seen Cabin in the Woods, you probably know where I'm going, in a way, but he is, if you will, the fool archetype, and he is given a redemption possibility. Now, it could be argued that maybe this was unfair. He was told quite late on, he's in the cell, he hasn't got much time left, that he could actually save the girl. And I did think it was a bit cruel when I first saw it, but over time I realised that if he was less cowardly, to use Six's words later on, he could have said something sooner. Even at first when it's like, oh, not another, look, this isn't the first one I've hit, I'm going to own up to it, there's a girl up the road, I don't know if she's still alive, go and help her, find a way of saving her. He could have come forward sooner if he'd just been, braver and owned up to it. But it does underpin, I think, one of the great themes of the film. Whilst we can, analyse various different elements on their own, I think the overall theme is very much clear right at the forefront. We hear the word retribution, we hear a vengeance, justice that isn't really justice. We hear it so much throughout this film, and I think that is the theme. It's where is the line between the two? Many people think that vengeance and justice are interchangeable, but vengeance is often a personal goal. It's for your own benefit. It's so you feel satisfied. Justice is so that everyone is satisfied or everyone benefits. And I think that's an interesting thing to look at with this film. When you know that that's what it's really kind of getting to, the underlying message, if you will, it does make you look at these characters very differently. Because these are meant to be police officers, they're meant to be justice. But most of them are driven by retribution, vengeance, blood, lust. And I find it interesting that one of the lines mentioned is the old way. Now, the old way could be seen as biblical, and if you look in the Old Testament, the old way is generally fire and brimstone vengeance. You will suffer for what you've done. It was only really in the New Testament that God was kind of like, all right, chill out. I'll let you buy your way back. I'll be a bit nicer to people. It's like having a child changed him, like it does with so many people, maybe. But I think it is interesting because there's so much biblical reference, and like I say, early Bible is full of fire and vengeance. Now, it's around this time that we get our second overt biblical reference in the vagabond on the earth line from Genesis 4:14.
I shall be a vagabond in the earth, and everyone that findeth me shall slay me.
That's the one.
Now, this is attributed to Cain, which leads me into my 6 is Cain theory that I was alluding to earlier. They were both spurned by God. He says that he's jumped ship a bit later on. He's given up on God's works, if you will. Now, yes, he could be a fallen angel, one of Lucifer's buddies, if you will, but it does still follow for Cain. They both wanted to curry favour with God. Abel seemed to be getting God's love because his heart was pure. Anything he was offering was from a good place. Whereas Cain's heart was evil, all his works were evil. As we find in John, this is the reason given for why he killed his brother. So, it's maybe less that he's jumped ship, but that he was cast out, but he's trying to save face. And maybe this is kind of some penance that he's doing, sort of claiming these souls. I'm not as familiar with the story of Cain and Abel, so if anyone wants to clarify in the comments, that's welcomed. Just make sure my interpretation is correct. But I still think there's enough evidence based on my knowledge that he could be Cain but it's not 100% compelling. Like how, he could be a fallen angel, it's not 100%, he could be the devil, it's not 100%, so there's a lot of interpretation, and that's just one thing that came to me through viewing. One of the things that did come to me is the fact that Six does seem to have a sense of honour, a moral or ethical code, which is probably why he gives Caesar a chance, albeit late. He does seem to have a goodness in him, which could go against the Cain idea, but people do change, and like I say, maybe this is some kind of penance to curry favour. But he's not the only one who could do with changing, and there is an interesting element that comes through as we, again, are starting to really lead into the end, where the sergeant walks past the missing persons posters, and they're all young men. In fact, the one in the centre is the guy who he goes home and beats. And that's kind of terrifying. Again, that was rewarded on a second view. All these people have something horrible inside themselves, and many of them could be argued as bullies. And it's been said for many years, when people are dealing with being bullied, etc., that the bullies probably hate themselves. They're doing it because there's something about themselves that they do not like. It doesn't make it feel any better, but, it's something that we are told, and I think all of these people do hate themselves, apart from Caesar, because he's not a bully per se. He's more self-destructive. Obviously, yes, he does run the girl down and Six down, but that's just through laziness and inaction and just not caring. It's not that he's out and out malicious. So that's, I think, why he gets a bit of a chance. But from the point that, everyone's left the station apart from Rachel, it really starts to descend into madness very quickly. We have Bezic basically braining himself in. We have Hume going crazy, and, Mundy and Warnock coming back, and literally an eye for an eye, I guess you could say, in that scene. Still makes me kind of feel a bit uneasy. Everything does go absolutely mental very quickly. It's only within the last sort of under an hour that everything really starts to ramp up, but maybe that's because midnight is the time, so everything needs to be dealt with by then. Maybe this is, Six's doing, speeding everything along, if you will. But yeah, the last 20 minutes is the most lunacy I think I've seen in a film, and Rachel says it herself brilliantly. What is wrong with this town? It's absolutely insane, and this is where, the biblical quotes are coming thick and fast from the sergeant. He quotes from John 5:28, coming forth from the graves. He mentions carried me away from Revelation 17:3. Fire is kindled in mine anger from Deuteronomy 32:22. The land will be scorched from Isaiah 9:19. There are so many biblical references coming out of him, but they're all about fire and vengeance and blood. They're all about this last 20 minutes of lunacy in this film. They're all about what he feels he is. He feels he's an avenging angel. Now, one interpretation of Six is that he's in fact an avenging angel. And arguably, if this is maybe Purgatory, maybe Rachel's being trained, if you will, to be an avenging angel by him. This last 20 minutes, everything concretes itself into what it is. This is where the idea of this film is just a tale of vengeance really cements itself, and I love it for that. It's had a great sort of hour and 10 minutes or so warming up, letting us know, who the characters are, what they've done, a few little kind of deaths and things like that, but the last 20 minutes really nails it, really ramps it up, and this guy who is so deluded just goes crazy and ends up kind of trying to kill everyone. Obviously ends up being killed himself by Rachel at the end. She does overcome her reluctance to kill. She does overcome her reluctance to be an angel of vengeance, if you will. But that's interesting as well, because Rachel has hope. Throughout, Six is clearly jaded. He's had enough. He's walked this world for an eternity, which is where maybe he's the devil or something, or Cain. But Rachel has hope. But of course, one of the final things I want to say, one of two really, is he does say people like to blame me, but I'm just a witness. Now, that could be attributed to the devil. People like to blame me. But it could also be attributed to Cain. It could be attributed to a number of things. This is again open to interpretation. People like to blame, but just a witness. But the final thing I want to leave you with is, if you know your Hebrew, you'll know Rachel comes from the Hebrew for you, female sheep. God is seen as a shepherd. We are his flock. I don't think this is an accident. But that's all I think I've got to say on Let Us Pray. It's a great vengeance tale. Still, I don't have a concrete answer, but it's thoroughly enjoyable and definitely has given me a lot of food for thought. So until next time, as always, take care.